Hello, and welcome to the Three Questions podcast, where we dive deep into the world of wealth management and connect you with industry experts. I'm your host, Wayne Baxter, Senior Executive Manager at One Capital Management. Now, if you or someone close to you is thinking about relocating or purchasing a property in South Florida, you'll not want to miss today's episode of the Three Questions podcast. We're going to address the three questions Canadians should ask before purchasing real estate in South Florida. Thank you, and thank you for taking time to check us out. And if you enjoy this episode of the Three Questions podcast, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. On this episode of the Three Questions podcast, our topic will be focused on the three questions Canadians should ask before purchasing real estate in South Florida. Canadians are increasingly relocating to South Florida. Obviously, the warm weather, the cost of living is an attraction, particularly the fact that Florida has no state income tax. That can definitely be appealing. It's also an attractive destination for real estate investment. However, some due diligence is required before diving into the deep end of the pool. To help you prepare you for this journey, I've invited a really good friend of mine, Rhonda Kohn. She's going to join us today, and she is a seasoned bi-coastal real estate agent with Keller Williams. She serves buyers and sellers and renters in Miami and Los Angeles. Rhonda, great to see you. Thank you for joining the Three Questions podcast.
Thank you for having me, Wayne. It's a pleasure to be here and so nice to see you as always.
As always, and great to see you too. And I really appreciate our friendship and all the support you've given me over the years, and I look forward to carrying on into the future. I think before we get to the three questions, given today's challenging real estate environment that we're in, I want to just ask you what it takes from your point of view to be truly effective in the role that you play. Because I would say, that time passes and things change in everything, including real estate.
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking it. I would think the number one thing is being able to adapt quickly. You have to be able to adapt to change. And with that change, you have to make new strategic moves. The old ones might have worked in the past, but in adjusting, you're going to need some new strategies. And along with that comes continuing to foster industry relationships and client relationships, and just taking really good care of clients and relationships. Yeah, I think those are the standouts, really.
And I think you would agree. The other thing is that all the relationships, the ancillary, if you want to call them that, ancillary relationships, beyond just the relationships with the obvious people you would think of, obviously our clients and the direct real estate professionals, but our network, our world is forever growing in terms of the people that we have to be connected with.
Oh, 100%. It absolutely is. Yeah. And so we have to really stay ahead of the market trends.
It's a huge part of the role that you play. So, with that in mind, let's get right to the three questions Canadians should ask before purchasing a real estate in beautiful South Florida. So the first question, and again, this is the interesting thing about these questions, is you're going to see that they all sort of center around the purchase of real estate without actually talking about the walls and ceilings and windows of a property. So question number one is a real fun one. Can I get financing for a U.S.-based property? Rhonda, your thoughts?
Yes, you absolutely can. I mean, there are many different variations to that question. The answer to that question, rather, do you have an ITIN number? Do you not? What is your situation? Are you looking to buy a snowbird, a vacation home? Are you looking to move and make a permanent residency to the United States? There are absolutely private lenders, Canadian lenders. You help with lenders, and many, many lenders can help Canadians to purchase property in Florida.
I would agree with you, and I'm a big, as in my world, I'm all about financial planning and capital forecasting, and my favorite line is just those who fail to plan to fail.
Mm-hmm.
So I think if you're living in Canada right now, and whether you're thinking about just having a vacation property or relocating here, it's all the due diligence that you do up front. And note that also applies to the financing role. It's obviously going to be a different story if you're, living in Canada and you're simply buying yourself a second property in Florida. You're going to take one path that way. But if you're actually looking to relocate to Florida, you're going to take a different route. And I can tell you, based on my own experience, you're going to want to be prepared. And obviously, the easier of the paths to take is if you're, relocating with a current employer, and they're simply moving you from, the job you have, say in Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and you're moving down to South Florida with the same job with the same company. That makes that process a bit more easier to get financing than if you're simply a sole proprietor starting your own new business in the US. That could be a bit more challenging. But again, the idea is to sort of look before you leave.
100%.
Better to
Agreed. Yeah,
plan.
always have to plan.
So question number 2 is, what is the difference about buying a home in Florida in general? What's so unique about buying a property there versus, say, anywhere else in the US?
Yeah. Well, Florida is unique in itself, unlike other states, because Florida, well, not all states, but some states, Florida has no state income tax, right? So if you're a full-time resident in the state of Florida, you can escape the state income tax. So that's kind of a nice piece, not specific to property, but a nice little benefit. I think the difference is in moving to Florida, most people move to Florida because they want a coastal property. They want to be close to the beach. So depending on what they're looking to buy, they might be able to get something for less than they could in other places. Now, that said, I mean, the prices in Florida, as we all know, have gone sort of sky high like everywhere else in the country, but I still think it's a little bit more affordable in some neighborhoods than others. The caveat are the high homeowners association fees. Yeah.
That's the big one. Another one I'd like to chime in on, if you don't mind, is
Yes.
the homestead, which is like basically it's a property tax rate for homeowners who actually are residents of Florida. That's a huge difference that you can take advantage of if you're, again, a resident. It's important, I think, to know there's some rules around them though, and just a little bit more on it is that, if you're a Canadian and you're thinking about, just part-time residency into the US, or just being an investor, the problem with a homestead exemption is it doesn't benefit you, right? So much as if you are going to relocate to Florida permanently. As a permanent resident, there's definitely an opportunity there. But if you are not moving to Florida permanently, you're just going to stay there, you're likely going to face higher property tax rates.
Yes. If you're a permanent resident, you can save up to $50,000 on the taxable value of your property, which is kind of nice. And additionally, sort of a side bonus is that it protects you from certain creditors. Doesn't get you out of your property taxes or your IRS taxes, but it does get you out of certain creditors. So, somebody files a lien, you have that loophole with the property is protected with your homestead. So that's kind of nice.
Remember I told you earlier about the importance of planning. So, those who fail to plan, those who fail to plan to fail. I think it's a good idea if you're looking to purchase property in Florida to consider what the long-term plan is. Is this going to be something you're going to be doing just as a vacation property and you're always going to maintain a residency in Canada, or are you actually looking eventually to relocate? Because that will have an impact on your finances going forward. Right?
100%.
Canadians who, and this is the good news, Canadians that, later become permanent residents may qualify for that homestead exemption once they establish their residency, a permanent residency in Florida. So there are potential to take advantage of it. But again, if you're just simply doing it as a vacation property, obviously they're going to have a bit of a more of an issue to deal with. One other thing I wanted to bring up is the property insurance, and maybe you could just chime in a little bit on the role that property insurance plays in your mind in purchasing a property in Florida.
Well, it's difficult in a lot of states right now, but in Florida,
And we're seeing that in California, as you well know.
oh yeah, definitely in California, you're dealing with the earthquakes, with the fires, things of that nature. A lot of your carriers in California have, pulled out of the market. The same applies in Florida. In Florida, you've got to get hurricane insurance, flood insurance, wind or wind mitigation. And many of those are only being underwritten by Citizen, which is owned by the state of Florida currently, because a lot of the carriers said, nope, we're out. And then there's, sort of a lot of folks self-insuring, banking on, I've got enough money put aside. If there's a disaster, I can pay for it out of my own pocket. Because what do? I mean, there's always the high-end carriers, but the average person can't afford that. They just can't afford to go to the high-end carrier. Yeah.
So, as we've talked about this on the podcast on previous episodes
Mm-hmm.
about the importance, again, before you commit to purchasing property, you want to make sure that you can get it insured. Because, the place might look perfect and have all the perks that you're looking for, but if you can't get coverage for it, then, then what, right?
Yeah. You want to do that during your home inspection period, I might add, because those quotes take some time to come back from carriers. The sooner you get moving on that, the sooner you get that information back.
So our guest today is Rhonda Kohn. She's with Keller Williams. She's a bi-coastal real estate agent, and she's addressing the three questions Canadians should ask before purchasing a home in Florida, whether it's as a second property, vacation property, or for a relocation. The third question we're going to address is this. My title company told me that the IRS will withhold some proceeds from the sale of my Florida-based property. Now, this is after you've owned the property, obviously, for a while. How much are they going to withhold? Now, I'm going to address this off the top, is that, the reality of it is it's going to be based on the value of the property, and there's a percentage that they can take up to 15% of the value of the property, right? So what they're going to basically do first is make sure that the taxes, if you're a Canadian resident, the taxes are going to be withheld to cover any costs on the sale of that property. Because remember, one of the unique things about a real estate property in Canada versus the US, especially principal residence, is there's no capital gains tax on Canadian property. And if you're a Canadian living in Canada, there's no withholding. But once you cross that border, there's a withholding tax that you have to you have to think about. So again, withholding tax, super important question to ask and be aware of. Again, once you own that property, you're a homeowner, you're saying, okay, it's now time to either, I'm still a Canadian resident, I want to sell the property, and all of a sudden you find out, wait a minute, I can't get all the proceeds. So again, something else to be aware of.
100%.
And again, the purpose of it, just to be clear, is that the government wants to make sure that the foreign sellers are paying their fair share of the capital gains, right? That's really, and that just doesn't. The Canadians are not specifically being picked on here. It's applicable to any foreign national who sells a U.S. based property.
Yes.
Now. Again, and I think that's all related to something called Foreign Investment in Real Estate Tax is the Foreign Investment
FIRPTA.
in Real
Yes.
Estate Property Tax Act, or FIRPTA, right? All right, so Ron, I can't help but think, just from your standpoint, and again, I can't help but think about what's going on right now in the real estate industry, and I know that you're more than aware of some of the rule changes that we've seen here recently in regards to the selling and purchasing of real estate in the U.S., right? There's some rule changes that have taken place. I know that you're more than aware of it. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what impact you think that is going to have on your role as a real estate agent, what impact that will have on buyers in particular and sellers in the U.S.
Yeah. I think that the buyers in the US and or buyers coming from Canada to purchase in the US, I think it could mean an additional out-of-pocket expense for them that they hadn't, considered up front, because they are going to secure a buyer's agent. And if the seller is not offering a compensation, then they might be the ones to be paying their agent's commission. And so they have to factor in that additional expense and the fact that they'll be asked to sign a buyer broker agreement before they can view any homes. So that's going to be a change on the buyer side. And I think on the sell side, it's just going to take more education. because, Sizer Burnett, I mean, really not a whole lot has changed other than the fact that as agents, we can no longer publish commissions on the multiple listing service, which is kind of a pain in the neck for us because we now have to call each and every listing agent and say, hey, is the seller going to be offering the buyer's agent any kind of compensation? And if not, how do we approach it? I mean, there's so many dynamics to that in itself, but it just is, it's more legwork. And we're really going to have to sell ourselves and show our value to buyers and sellers up front because they want to be educated. They want to understand what are these new rules and how do they affect me? And how is it going to save me money or how is it going to hurt me? And so I think it's spending more time and just educating the consumer on both sides of the table.
Just as an aside on that, Rhonda, I would think that the real estate community is relatively tight and people work with each other more than once. And I can't help but think that for these long-standing relationships, and we talked about earlier about, the importance of fostering relationships with your colleagues and the people that you work with, I can't help but think that for these long-standing relationships, they would probably be more easy to negotiate something between the buying and the listing agent and the buying agent to make sure that this becomes less of an issue for the buyer as possible. Is that your take, or do you think it's going to be a bit more of a challenge?
I think it depends on who the agent is on the other side, honestly. I think that what we are going to run up against, even though, yes, we have a fiduciary duty, and yes, we're going to show our clients, we're supposed to show, shall we say, our clients each and every home that they want to see, even if that means we're essentially working for free if they can't pay us. I think we're going to see that the only ones it's hurting are the sellers not offering that compensation, because what buyer's agent is going to want to show their home, even though we're supposed to, if they're working for free, right? So they're going to see fewer buyers coming through their property potentially. And then on the buy side, it's going to hurt the first time buyers who have scrimped and saved and barely have enough for the down payment and closing costs if they can't afford to obtain a buyer broker and have to pay that agent. So
So in
those are
other
really
words,
the ones
for
hurt by it.
whatever they thought they had to accumulate to make the sale happen, they're going to discover potentially they're going to have to come up with, I'll just make up a number here, 2.5% to 3% more, just to make of the purchase price to make this whole thing close.
That is correct. If they've exhausted all other resources in terms of getting a credit from the seller, working it into the financing. I mean, there are a lot of nuances to this new piece in terms of how it can be handled and approached. But yes, that could ultimately hurt a buyer.
Well, looking at this from the outside, and I'll be very clear here, I'm not a real estate expert and I don't play one on TV here, but just from a layperson's point of view, I think I'm going to want to be working with an experienced listing and selling buying agent to ensure that these transactions get executed with as little headache as possible. Rhonda, I'm really glad that you took some time to join me today. Great conversation. I guess what I'd like to do before we wrap up is, if somebody wants to, we've talked about a lot, we covered a lot of area. If somebody wants to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to contact you?
They can contact me by phone at my toll-free number, 800-825-0102, or they can email me at my name, Rhonda Kohn, at kw.com. Those are the two best ways to reach me.
Rhonda, I really appreciate you making time to join us today. A lot of fun, great connecting with you again. And Rhonda Kohn, again, is a seasoned bi-coastal real estate agent with Keller Williams. She serves buyers, sellers, and renters in both Miami and Los Angeles. Rhonda Kohn, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I look forward to bringing you the 3 Questions podcast, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channels. And to receive a notification of when our latest episode has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com/meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.